ancient tablets from Mesopotamia claim something shocking: humans weren't created out of love, purpose, or divine inspiration. They were created because the gods were tired of doing hard labor. These 4,000-year-old texts say our entire species was designed to dig canals, grow food, and feed the gods so they could finally rest. In this video, we'll break down exactly what those tablets say, how the earliest cities shaped this belief, why later cultures, like the writers of the Bible, copied and softened the story, and how modern theories twisted it into aliens, Nibiru, and hidden civilizations. But if humans were made to work, then what were the gods afraid would happen if we ever stopped? Let's find out what the tablets actually say. It's surprising to see what the oldest clay tablets in the world actually say about why humans exist, because the message is simple, direct, and honestly a little unsettling. These ancient stories don't claim that humans were created out of love or some great spiritual purpose. They say we were created because someone had to do the hard work. The gods were tired, the workload was heavy, and they needed a labor force to keep the world running. Most of what we know comes from a Babylonian story called Atrahasis. It was written long before the Epic of Gilgamesh included its own flood tale, and even earlier than the oldest versions of the biblical flood story. Atrahasis is not dramatic or poetic, and in fact, it reads almost like a report about a workplace problem in the divine world. According to the story, the universe is run by two groups of gods. The senior gods make the decisions, while the junior gods, called the Igigi, do the physical labor. This was tough work that looked a lot like the real jobs people in Mesopotamia had to do every day. The Igigi dug canals to bring water to farms, built embankments to control flooding, and worked on construction projects that kept cities functioning. After many years of this difficult labor, the Igigi finally reached their breaking point. The story describes them burning their tools, refusing to work any longer, and marching to Enlil's temple in protest. Enlil was one of the most powerful gods, and his temple represented order and authority. The fact that the Igigi surrounded it showed just how desperate they had become. The senior gods held an emergency meeting. They realized that their entire system depended on constant labor, and now the workers had quit. Something had to change. That's when Enki, also called Ea, the god known for wisdom and clever solutions, suggested a new idea. Instead of making the Igigi go back to work, why not create a new being to take over those duties? A species that was strong, obedient, and able to do the physical tasks the gods no longer wanted to do. The plan was accepted right away. To create this new species, the gods performed a ritual that is one of the earliest written creation stories we have. A god named Geshtu-e, whose name means intelligence, was sacrificed. The priests and scribes who wrote the tablets believed that intelligence or awareness needed to be passed on to the new creatures, so Geshtu-e's blood and flesh were mixed with clay. Clay was a familiar material. Mesopotamians built houses, bowls, and even writing tablets out of it. The birth goddess Nintu, also called Memi, shaped this clay and divine blood mixture into the first humans. The tablets describe this process clearly, almost like instructions. And they also state the purpose of these new beings very directly. Humans were made so the gods would no longer have to toil. There is no hidden meaning behind this. Humans were created to take on the labor that the gods found exhausting. In the world of Atrahasis, this is the foundation of humanity's role. This idea shows up again when you look at the daily tasks assigned to humans in the story. People are expected to farm, raise animals, keep canals clear, and maintain temples. These jobs match exactly what was needed to run a real Mesopotamian city. The tablets also describe offerings such as bread, beer, meat, and incense as actual food for the gods. In the Mesopotamian worldview, the gods depended on these offerings. Humans had to bring them regularly to keep the divine world satisfied and functioning. A major question appears here: if humans were created for work, what happens when their population grows and becomes loud, messy, or overwhelming? In Atrahasis, the answer is dramatic. Enlil becomes irritated by the noise of humans and decides to wipe them out. The story treats the Great Flood not as a punishment for sin, but as a response to a noisy, bothersome workforce. It's a very different way of understanding the flood story. However, Enki disagrees with this plan. He secretly warns Atrahasis, teaching him how to build a boat to survive the disaster. This version of the flood story is older than the famous one in Gilgamesh, and it focuses on humans' usefulness rather than their morality. Humans are almost destroyed because of inconvenience, not wrongdoing. They survive because Enki believes the world still needs workers. What makes this idea even stronger is that it isn't limited to myths. Many everyday clay tablets from Mesopotamia support the idea that humans were seen as a labor force. Archaeologists have found thousands of administrative tablets that record rations of grain, beer, and oil given to different workers. These tablets list people in groups based on their duties: temple workers, field workers, builders, and more. The writing is simple and practical. It shows humans as part of a giant system focused on keeping the temples supplied and the cities running. Other tablets contain warnings about what happens when people fail to keep up with their responsibilities. Ritual instructions mention diseases, droughts, or disasters as punishments for neglecting the gods. Early hymns describe kings as shepherds chosen by the gods to organize the people. The king's job was to make sure everyone worked, because the system depended on constant effort. If people stopped working, the entire world, both human and divine, could fall into chaos. Across these texts, one theme appears again and again: humans are workers in a large, organized structure. And to understand why this idea made sense to people thousands of years ago, we need to look at the world they lived in and the pressures that shaped their beliefs. The world behind the myth. What makes this part of the story especially shocking is that many of the most important clues about why ancient people believed humans were created to work have only been fully understood in the last few decades, thanks to new excavations, improved translations, and advanced digital methods that allow archaeologists to reconstruct broken tablets and ruined cities in ways that were impossible before. These discoveries show that the world behind the creation myths was not a hazy spiritual realm, but a real physical landscape filled with giant cities, powerful rulers, intense labor systems, and temples that operated like massive institutions. So, if everything around you demanded endless work, wouldn't you also believe you were made for it? To understand why humans were described as workers for the gods, we have to explore the rise of the first cities, because this was the environment that shaped the stories written in clay. One of the earliest and most influential cities on Earth was Uruk, which appeared around 3500 BCE and grew into a huge urban center with tens of thousands of people. At its height, Uruk covered several square kilometers and was larger and more complex than almost any other settlement of its time. It wasn't just a cluster of houses, it was a fully developed city with grand monuments, organized districts, and tightly managed systems for food, labor, and religion. Two of Uruk's most important structures were the Inanna precinct dedicated to the goddess Inanna, and the massive white temple that sat on top of the Anu ziggurat. These weren't small shrines. They were multi-building complexes with courtyards, storerooms, altars, and administrative rooms. Archaeologists have found evidence of workshops, kitchens, and scribal schools inside these precincts, showing that they functioned as economic and educational centers as well as religious places. The temples employed thousands of workers, farmers, shepherds, bakers, brewers, potters, and scribes, and everyone depended on the temple system for their survival. One of the most important objects found in Uruk is something many people wouldn't expect: a simple bowl. These beveled rim bowls are rough, quickly made clay containers found in huge numbers across Uruk-era sites. Many researchers believe they were used to distribute standard rations of grain or beer to large groups of workers, like a paycheck in food form. Their sheer quantity shows how organized and widespread labor systems already were. When you hold one of these bowls today, you are holding a piece of evidence that thousands of people received daily rations as part of a structured workforce, managed by temple administrators who kept careful records. Another major center was Nippur, the religious heart of Sumer, dedicated to the god Enlil. Nippur was not politically dominant, but it was spiritually powerful. Kings from many different cities traveled there to receive recognition from Enlil's priests. A king who was accepted at Nippur gained the right to rule, and one who was rejected lost legitimacy. This created a system where religion reinforced political authority, and political authority reinforced labor demands. If Enlil approved the king, and the king required people to work, then the work became part of the divine order. It is here that the idea of humans being created for labor becomes tied to real institutions and real power. This connection between divine authority and political control appears clearly in the Sumerian king list, a long written record that describes rulers from before and after a great flood. The king list claims that kingship descended from heaven, meaning that the right to rule came directly from the gods. This idea wasn't symbolic. It was used to justify the authority of ruling families and to support the labor systems those rulers depended on. The list begins with impossibly long reigns of antediluvian kings, some ruling for tens of thousands of years, which likely served to separate the mythical past from the historical present. After the flood, the reigns become more realistic and match archaeological evidence. One name stands out: Gilgamesh. His appearance in the king list, combined with the Tumul inscription, which links him to real construction efforts in Nippur, shows that he was not just a mythic hero but a real ruler whose memory became larger than life. By blending legendary figures with historical ones, the king list created a continuous chain of authority that suggested humans should work because the gods had chosen the rulers who commanded them. The beliefs behind this system were shaped by the gods themselves, especially the group known as the Anunnaki. In the original Mesopotamian stories, the Anunnaki were not extraterrestrials or beings from distant planets. They were a council of gods who governed different aspects of life and nature. Anu ruled the heavens, Enlil ruled the air and the earth, Enki governed water and wisdom, and Inanna represented love, war, and political power. These gods did not simply give moral advice. They issued commands, managed the fate of cities, and expected offerings and service. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Click the next video for more exciting content.